Did you know that the United States is the largest energy power on the planet? Yep, that's absolutely right. The United States has taken the position as the world's largest fossil fuel producer. No other country, not even Russia or Saudi Arabia, even come close to this North American giant.
The golden era of American energy is now underway.
This energy revolution is having important consequences and it's changing politics in the USA, and it's also the topic that we're addressing in this VisualPolitik video. Just 8 years ago, the supply of petrol and natural gas was one of the biggest concerns that the USA had about their future. And this wasn't a particularly new concern. The country had been dependent on foreign petrol and gas for decades.
The other thing is that we have only leased out and begun to explore 2% of our outer continental shelf for oil, where it is believed by everyone familiar with that fuel and that source of energy that there are vast supplies yet to be found.
Secondly, we need an active exploration program in America. The only way to become less dependent on foreign sources of crude oil is to explore at home.
I think we can easily, within 7, 8, 10 years, if we put our minds to it, we can eliminate our dependence on the places in the world that harm our national security if we don't achieve our independence from it.
All right. The most important thing we can do is to make sure we control our own energy. So here's what I've done since I've been president. We have increased oil production to the highest levels in 16 years.
At the time, it was said that the national security of the USA relied on being able to ensure the supply of natural gas and petrol to the industry and economy that was so dependent upon it. And this, well, it wasn't really easy to do. At that time, it's possible you might remember it, the world seemed to be facing an imminent decline in fossil fuels. It really did seem as if we were about to run out of them. Let's have a quick look at the situation in the USA back at that time.
From the early 70s, the petrol reserves in the United States were declining year after year. Production had dropped by about 50%, and even the production of natural gas was starting to decline.
In other words, the United States was quickly running out of energy resources, and they were at risk of having to rely on suppliers that, well, weren't exactly trustworthy in the opinion of those responsible for national security. We are, of course, talking about countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Nigeria. However, they've changed a lot since then, and as sometimes happens, the predictions were wrong, and crude storage tanks around the world are completely full. So, well, what exactly is happening? Well, let's take a closer look at that.
A petrol power returns.
The United States has gone through an important energy revolution in the last few years. Oil production has almost doubled, and the reserves which can be exploited guarantee that supply for many years to come. Have a look at this chart that we've taken from the Wall Street Journal. It shows the increase of oil production in the USA since 2011. As you can probably guess, the fact that the USA has almost doubled its oil production is closely related to the huge drops in oil prices since 2014. And it's not just the petrol. Something really similar has happened with natural gas as well. Today, the US is the world's largest producer of both of these resources, and as you can imagine, this has consequences on multiple fronts. But what has happened so that this boom could take place? Well, as many of you know, it is all due to a technological revolution known as fracking. This technology, well, it's actually nothing new. We've known about it for decades, but until recently, it wasn't really economically viable. And look, before we get into this topic any further, we need to point out that fracking, it's a pretty controversial topic, and for now, it's only used to produce petrol on a large scale in 4 countries: the US, Canada, Russia, and Argentina. At the end of this video and in the description below, we're actually going to leave a link to something that will explain how this process works. In its defense, we'd also like to point out that it is a pretty new technique, and as this technique is being used and developed, its actual impact is being reduced. Anyway, the safety and that sort of thing is actually a discussion for another video, because in this video we're going to focus on both the economic and the political consequences of fracking.
Feeding the economic engine.
First of all, oil imports to the US have been reduced significantly in the United States, and as laws of supply and demand apply, all of this additional petrol has made the prices drop. This means the lesser amount of petrol that the country is still importing, it's also significantly cheaper. This has caused the price of gas/petrol at the pump to fall, so much so that it's actually estimated that American consumers are saving about $150 billion every year. This is money that is then used for purchasing other products, or setting up businesses, or just putting into a savings account. But hold on a minute, because this is not the end of today's story. Oh, not even close. Cheaper petrol and gas also benefits industry, and not just those industries that use this type of energy, but also industry that uses it as their raw material. I'm of course now talking about the petrochemical industry, the one that produces plastic and PVC. The combination of a large quantity of petrol available, the certainty of supply, and low prices are triggering an industrial boom in the petrochemical sector. And it's really important to look at these numbers closely because they're absolutely huge.
The petrochemical sector is developing projects valued at $185 billion just in the United States. In 2016, these sorts of projects were 50% of the entire national industrial investment. It's expected that these investments will turn the United States into a great plastic exporter.
And just so you get an idea, they expect that in just a few years, the net exports of petrol-based products like plastics and also fertilizers and solvents will exceed $110 billion a year. This is almost as much as all of the petrol that Saudi Arabia exports.
You've got to pinch yourself sometimes and say, this is the envy of the world. Neil Chapman, president of the chemical division at ExxonMobil.
Such business will certainly help the US reduce their trade deficit, a deficit that Trump is always complaining about. But wait a second, because, well, there's yet more. The supply of petrol, it's simply no longer a priority or a concern for the country's national security.
In December 2015, US Congress removed the prohibition on exports of natural gas and petrol.
Now the US is about to become a net exporter of natural gas, and it is calculated that the US will sell an average of 1 million petrol barrels per day in 2017.
US oil exports double, reshaping vast global markets.
Well, the United States still imports foreign petrol, but much less than it used to. Further, because countries like to have energy security by diversifying their sources, many countries are willing to pay a premium for this US supply. And you can be sure that the companies in the US are taking advantage of that. It is in natural gas where this change has been the greatest. Until recently, the transport of gas was difficult and huge gas pipelines were needed. But now, thanks to the new technology of liquefied natural gas, it can easily be transported like petrol in giant tankers. The gas supplied this way is almost half of the world's supply, and here, American companies are the superstars.
The US is now projected to be one of the top 3 natural gas exporters in the world by 2020.
Less imports, gas exports, a revival of the industrial sector. It all looks like rather bad timing for Trump's protectionism. And, well, hold on just a minute, because this energy revolution, it also has political consequences.
A diplomatic leap.
It's impossible to understand US international politics if we don't consider the impact of this energy revolution. Let me explain. Up until now, the supply of petrol was a priority for national security. The Middle East and oil and gas producing countries had an important role in the American diplomatic agenda. But the new petrol scheme of the United States has caused priorities to change. For example, a new focus has been placed on Asia, which, as we've talked about before, is a goldmine of opportunities. Interestingly, without this change in priorities, Obama would have probably kept the troops in Iraq, and the situation in Yemen, Libya, or Syria would have been very, very different. But let's be really extra clear here. All of this petroleum means that the Middle East is not really that important to the United States anymore, a country that can now even afford to support the so-called Arab NATO, which is something pretty much like, okay, well, you guys go and take care of your own safety, and every now and then we'll give you a hand. to hopefully avoid the risk of a global crisis or something. Needless to say, this energy independence has also given Washington the opportunity to place more demands on the petro-monarchies of the Persian Gulf, especially when it comes to human rights. And by the way, if there is something that is absolutely certain, it is Trump's support for fracking. The new president wants to continue Obama's work, but to do it faster, eliminating any obstacle that might be in the way.
American energy first.
America first. America first.
Donald Trump has little doubt. He made the promise during his campaign and has kept his word since taking office. His priority has been to give petrol and gas development the green light. Among other things, he promised to eliminate many of the rules and restrictions Obama passed which could cause fracking to slow down. Trump, well, he wants cheap and abundant petrol, and he's willing to push to get it sooner rather than later. Trump has also chosen to surround himself with key people closely related to the petroleum industry. As Secretary of State, Trump decided to go for Rex Tillerson, who used to be the CEO of ExxonMobil. Then there's Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, who has been placed in charge of the Department of Energy. Texas is a state that is very closely related to the industry. And then there is the head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General in Oklahoma, another state well connected to the petroleum industry. Anyway, this is a revolution that the US is going through, and it's a revolution that has put great limits on the power of OPEC. Now, there is no question that fracking has its risks, but the reality is that it's a technology that's not going anywhere, and it does seem that with time and development, it's going to become safer. But until that time comes, environmental controls are absolutely essential. And now it's your turn. We'd love to know what you think of this energy revolution. Do you think it's the start of a new era for cheap petrol? You can leave your opinion in the comments below, as well as in this survey. And if you enjoyed this video, please do click that like button below and make sure you subscribe to always hear about our new videos. Also, please do check out the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that are not mine. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
America first. America first.